Unipkaaqutiarsiikpin taalaranillarannasuk unipkaaqtuaq qaaviuraqa.
Game mechanics are the rock on which solid games are built. Whereas graphics seek to dazzle our eyes and narratives probe our minds, the mechanics of a game are rather hidden from our sight, yet are arguably the most integral in making the game a memorable experience. Though the term is lacking a solid meaning outside of the industry, for developers and players, it's almost an inherent knowledge. So, in case you're not clear, let's try to set some ground rules and define just what these mechanics are. In essence, a game's mechanic is the core concept on which everything else is centered. For example, Counter-Strike is an action shooter, with the core mechanics being its shooting and its movement. Guns are usually accurate if you're standing still. Try and throw movement into the mix, however, and things get out of hand quickly. This seemingly simple and satisfying gameplay loop allows Counter-Strike to thrive in its own community, but it's not for everybody. Multiple inputs a second, managing your position in a 3D space, it's admittedly a lot to handle, and not all players want that kind of high-octane experience. So instead, let's slow things down with Never Alone, and explore what makes this game tick. Never Alone finds itself in a family of other puzzle platformers, such as Limbo and Inside, which involve your character moving across a 2D plane, interacting with the world in order to progress. However, unlike its relatives in the genre, Never Alone immediately sets itself apart by introducing our second playable character, Fox, who is just a bit more nimble than our main character, and thus is afforded more options with his mobility. Our main character, Nuna, has the ability to push and pull objects, and eventually gains Ebola, used to find spirits and break objects. These inputs, while simple, give the game a depth that similar games lack. While most of these games will have you using your brain to solve puzzles and jump across areas, with the addition of a second character, it adds a whole new layer of thinking, especially while the two characters have distinct roles within the game's world. There's a genuinely enjoyable back and forth between climbing walls as Fox and quickly throwing bolas while being chased as Nuna. But how does this actually affect the experience? Going back to the earlier example of an action shooter game, the game is centered around its combat, and while most games have a nice design to accompany it, at the base level, the game can be stripped down to blocks shooting at other blocks. The focus is on its complex mechanics and the skills the player needs to learn to get better at the game. Contrasting this, Never Alone has about 7 to 8 inputs and comparably simple mechanics. The difference lies in the goal of the game. Never Alone is a cinematic experience, and its simple interactions allow the player to take things easy and fully absorb the narrative being presented. It's this simplicity that makes the game a much more relaxed and immersive experience, as you let the ambient sounds, stunning visuals, and compelling narrative gently push you through the game. In an industry that's always trying to ramp up the speed, this slower pace allows the player to focus on more than just getting to the end of the level, but to take part in the journey there. The phrase, "less is more," is an adage that perfectly encapsulates the experience of this game. While the mechanics may be simpler than most popular games, Never Alone doesn't let that stop it from being a masterpiece in its own right. For what it lacks in mechanical substance, it's more than made up for by the game's narrative and style. This won't be one of the most challenging games you'll ever play, but there's a good chance it'll be in your memory a lot longer than that of the most popular releases. Not for testing your skill, but for testing your patience.